Hey friends, Mike Stenhouse here with another only on the current highlight from one of my previous In the Dugout podcasts. Go to quick links in the top menu bar of our oceanstatecurrent.com homepage to view all of our Only on the Current episodes. Today, we're following up on an interview from earlier this year with Rhonda Thomas, Chair of Truth in Education, and what was our most watched In the Dugout episode of the year, over 7,600 views. In this interview with a board member of Truth in Education and child psychologist, I explore with Dr. Jones how the controversial and age-inappropriate woke teachings that are being imposed on K-12 students can create high anxiety and emotional stress for these young children. And I asked Dr. Jones the big question: are government schools preparing to seize children away from their parents if they don't support irreversible and life-changing treatments and surgeries for their minor students? I hope you enjoy the episode. Well, joining me now is the chairman of that organization. He is a licensed psychologist. He's got a degree in divinity. I want to weave a little of that in here too. He's helped hundreds of families and individuals make positive changes in their lives as a psychologist for decades. He is on the board of Truth in Education. He's also involved in Christian grassroots advocacy, focusing on the rights of parents to control the educational and healthcare choices, the important choices that must be made for their children. So with all that as a backdrop, we welcome Dr. Robert Jones to In the Dugout.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's great to be with you today.
I've got my Harvard University hat on. Whenever I have a smart guy on like you, especially someone with a DR in front of their name, I feel like I got to try to make it seem like, I got a little bit of background there. And I understand you were going to wear a hat today, but it didn't quite go with your outfit.
It doesn't, and also it doesn't go with my massive head. But were I to have worn a hat, that is what I would have worn today.
Utopia Golf.
Utopia Golf. That's right. That's right.
Is that an actual club or golf course?
No, actually, it is based on Dr. David Cook's wonderful book that later became a movie entitled 7 Days in Utopia, which was talking about this PGA Tour professional who had fallen on hard times, and he went and found this old grizzled guy that taught him how to rethink his entire game. So
I love those golf movies. What is it, Bagger Vance and Tin Can and all that. So I'll have to check it out. All right, Dr. Jones, I know you like to go by Doc. Let's take a quick look at your organization's mission statement page. As the people can read, but tell us about what Truth in Education is all about.
Well, I think the very first sentence says it. And first of all, I need to tell you, you said at the beginning that I was the chairman of it. I am not. I am just simply a board member. Rhonda is our chair. Rhonda Thomas is our chair, and boy, we just follow her lead. But I think the first sentence says it all. Our mission is to stop the sexualization and indoctrination of our children in both public and private schools. Our focus is a little bit more on the public schools because I think citizens can exert more control over the public schools. But we are also very, very well aware that this problem occurs in the private schools as well.
Yes, we know that too. And how do you go about achieving your mission? Is it by educating the public and parents, or do you have any specific legislative or school committee or school system outreach and advocacy?
I think the best tool that we have at this point is to work from the ground up and to engage parents and grandparents and interested parties in informing them on what is actually going on in the schools, not just in terms of some of the material, which can have fairly high shock value, but by getting to the nuts and bolts of what is it that is behind a lot of these programs that are in our schools. In some ways, we've been, this is going to sound a little odd, but that's never stopped me before. But in some ways, we were quite blessed when COVID came along, because the kinds of
Yeah.
things that we have been working against for a long time.
Under the radar, right?
Yes, it just went under the radar because it was being done just out in the it was being done behind the scenes in the schools.
Yeah.
But when COVID came and all of a sudden education became a something that was being done in the home because you had Zoom.
Parents saw, right? Yeah.
Parents saw it and there was outrage to it. And I think our organization and organizations like ours around the country all of a sudden gained some leverage because people saw that, oh my gosh, this is real.
Yeah,
This
well,
is real.
we've really focused on that issue on this show for the last 2 years. We've had parents from across the state who have been shared those concerns, many of whom have gone out to have national profiles on whatever shows, and one of whom we interviewed yesterday who went on and ran and won a seat on her local school committee. So now your organization is based in Atlanta. I think,
Yes.
like most, you probably started with Georgia issues, but you're now national in reach, right?
I believe so. I believe that is correct. Although my personal interest, of course, remains primarily in
Okay.
Georgia.
But obviously the educational, informational
Oh,
materials you put out are applicable anywhere.
I know that Rhonda has cooperated
Yeah.
very, very closely with other organizations. Yes.
All right. All right. Before we get back to some of the specific things and some specific questions, I especially want to ask you as a psychologist.
Sure.
I just want to bring up very quickly the issue of testing. We just had
Yes.
the National Assessment of Educational Proficiency, the nation's report card come out in Rhode Island and other states. We had RICAS, another assessment system, comprehensive assessment system that states do. And the scores weren't good. The question I want to ask you, and you can attack this from a technical or psychological point of view.
Okay.
When we're inundating children with all this age inappropriate stuff, whether it's white supremacy or anti-American, over sexualization or transgender, and the assignments are all geared towards that, can that or does that have an impact on student achievement and / test scores in your view?
In my opinion, it does. And it does for this reason. Let's say that I were to take some children and introduce them to this material that is clearly developmentally inappropriate to them. One of the things that happens when somebody is bombarded with stuff that is not appropriate to them or is traumatic to them is it increases their anxiety threshold. The anxiety that they experience just in the course of life. And when that happens, when your anxiety goes up, your ability to focus will go down. When your ability to focus goes down, then your ability to learn is going to go down as well. So it's really not a surprise to me that as you introduce all of this stuff, which is not only extraneous to the educational task, but is also directly inappropriate to these young people's development, it's no surprise to me that measures and metrics of education are going to drop. In fact, I would expect them to.
All right, so that's clear, and I think that makes great sense. And what you bring up is something I was planning to ask you about later, but let's bring it up now since you brought it up.
Sure.
Child anxiety. Now, we talked about this with Rhonda, and we believe it to be true here. We're hearing the talk here. As we understand it, school systems are investing a lot of money in bringing on mental health professionals into the school system to deal with this increasing child anxiety. But our argument is this is a vicious circle. The stupid, excuse my French, but these divisive and controversial curriculums, like you just said, are causing the child anxiety, and yet they try to want to treat it with a band-aid of bringing in child psychologists, which, by the way, gives them another reason to hide stuff for medical privacy from parents, right?
Okay. Well, yes and no.
Okay, but also,
yes.
but you're putting a band-aid and you're perpetuating the cycle that you're causing yourself. Talk to me about all that.
I couldn't have said it much better, but Actually, what's going on in Georgia is a little bit different. Is it's not so much that we are bringing in mental health professionals into the schools. What they're doing, at least in Georgia, is some of the newest education bill that was just passed through a very strong bipartisan effort just this year. What it does is it takes school psychologists and excuse me, let me rephrase that. It takes school counselors and it gives them the same status as what would be called a licensed professional counselor, but they don't have that kind of training. But this
Well,
gives them the opportunity
great
to
point.
make diagnoses, to give treatment. It's questionable at this point if it also allows them to do things like bill Medicaid, but you see the point. And so here's where the problem comes in too. But first of all, and I don't mean this to sound like I'm boasting or anything, but it just is what it is. There is no school counselor in the state that has the same level of training as a psychologist. None. And yet these people are now able, under this law, to give diagnoses. Now,
Wow.
could
That's
mean
a
that
Georgia law?
yes, it is. And that
Oh,
could
let me
mean,
get this straight before you go on. I just want to,
yes,
I like to rephrase things in my own language so I can get it straight through my thick head. Um,
okay,
there's a law that enables student counselors who are there to
school counselors,
school counselor. We used to call them student counselors, but
yeah,
they're there to educate to counsel you on your educational
correct,
prospects.
correct.
They're now given the authority to act as a psychologist, if you would.
Well, a licensed professional counselor, and even then, they don't have the training for that. I mean, here's where the problem comes in, Mike, and this is where it's really serious. We don't even think about this. We don't even think down the road as to what this could mean. But let's say that you go to see one of these school counselors and they give a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, which is relatively common, but a fairly serious diagnosis, right? And now you do that with a child that's 10, 11, 12 years old. They then go to their physician or to a psychiatrist and they're prescribed antidepressant medication. Okay. Now, let's then take this 10, 20 years down the road or
I mean,
10
now
years
these
down the
school
road.
counselors can't prescribe medicine,
No,
can
they
they?
cannot, but they
Okay,
could refer them to
okay,
psychiatrists
yep,
who could.
yep.
Now, here's my point. Let's say they have this diagnosis on their record now. What does that mean, say 10 years from now? This 12-year-old who has this diagnosis is now 22, and they decide that they want to purchase a firearm. Will a red flag law kick into effect that prohibits them from doing that? It
Yeah.
very well could. Could they be impeded from serving in the United States military if they so desired? They certainly could. And I mean, I've had to do several times in my career, I've had to get young people who were mistakenly diagnosed with something, get that cleared up for them so that they could serve in the military. But that's an expensive process.
Wow.
And fortunately, in the case of those families, they had the resources with which to afford it. But I mean, this is just one thing that could happen when these diagnoses are mistakenly applied.
All right, and they're being mistakenly applied by you've basically said it, but I'm going to put it in my words. They're being mistakenly applied by people who are acting as a psychologist without a license.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a way to say that, but yeah, that's true.
I mean, if we're empowering school counselors to do all this, that's practicing psychology without a license.
Well, technically, no, it's not, but in practice,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, okay, maybe
yeah,
not
it
according
is.
to the law, but
It is practically speaking, yes.
yeah, okay, yeah. All right, let's qualify it that way. Now, but let's go back and let me hear your
Sure.
discussion on my original, not my
Okay.
original, but the other point to this.
Yeah.
Is that it's as you said, it's these school curriculums causing the anxiety in the first place, So wouldn't the answer be, let's get rid of the core to the cause of the anxiety rather than treat the anxiety?
Yes, but I think it goes deeper than that, Mike.
Okay.
I really do. The biggest problem that comes up when you look at social emotional learning, all right? There are two things that I think are really problematic with it. First of all, when you look at social emotional learning, it's one of those things that, oh, it sounds really good, but when you try to define it, it becomes like trying to nail Jello to the wall. It just really can't be done.
Yeah.
But there's something else about it too that I really, really think is problematic. When you are looking at developing social skills and you're looking at developing emotional skills, that really is not a school's business. That is the business of parents. Now, some of the school systems might say, well, yes, but the parents obviously are not doing the job. Maybe so. I won't grant that 100%, but maybe so. But that still doesn't mean that that is the job of a school.
Right.
And I think that,
Agreed.
but I think what happens is when parents give over their right to the social and emotional training of their children, then what happens then is the value set of the school all of a sudden comes into play,
Right.
and they start acting with the authority of parents, but they're acting to put in values that they hold,
Right.
which can be radically different
Right.
from what
Right.
parents hold. And that's how I think you end up with the indoctrination, like on the different types of sexual morality. That's a parents to teach. But we'll go even one better on that. Here's one of the other things that happens when you're teaching this stuff. And I get a little worked up about this, as you're probably noticing. Here's one of the other things about it. When what they're teaching ultimately, and I heard this from someone just recently, and it just really blew my mind. They were talking about how the school systems now are teaching kids, you always look for compromise. You always want to look for compromise. You always want to see, that's their big thing now. But here's what that is, Mike. What they are doing is they're taking the philosophy of a guy named George Frederick Hegel, who actually partnered up with Karl Marx, right? And so in teaching kids, I mean, you think back about it, there's a thing called the Hegelian dialectic. It's from Hegel. It says there's always a thesis, then there's an antithesis. Those two fight it out and form this compromise, which is a synthesis, which then becomes the new thesis. It's communism. And that Hegelian process is what underlies so much of what we're seeing. That's how you end up with these things like math. 2 + 2 doesn't necessarily equal 4.
So that also says, don't stand for anything, don't hold firm to any values, because it's always a fluid situation that could change with the wind or whatever group of people you happen to be with, right?
Absolutely.
It's a way to me.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've never heard that before, but to me, my initial reaction, it's a way to refute the Constitution. It's a way to refute God. It's a way to refute all the things, the tradition of values this country was built on, because, just like the left likes to think of the Constitution, hey, it's all fluid, subject to the values of the day.
Well, of course it is. And that's fundamentally goes back to what you were just saying. It refutes God. I mean, you start talking to them about the authority of the Bible and they'll look like at you like it just doesn't compute. You start talking to them about the foundational events of our nation, and they will say, well, the Constitution is a living document, or
Right.
the Declaration of Independence was really just a document of racist
God-given
slaveholders.
truths, I'm sorry, are not fluid.
Absolutely.
Are not, and they are timeless. So this compromise thing, that's part of SEL. Okay.
I think so.
Let's look at some of the. Okay, let me share the screen and let's look at some of the issues that you have on your issues page. So we talk about comprehensive sex education. Again, I want to go through these pretty quickly.
Please. Okay.
We know it's age inappropriate. We've been through all that. We've got pornography, the depictions. You've seen them all, genderqueer, the lawnmower boy. You've probably seen all that stuff. But how does this affect the psychology of a kid when they're introduced to age inappropriate sexual concepts and images?
Uh, how, how does it not affect them? Right. I mean, there is no 4 to 6 year old child that is, there is no 4 to 6 year old child for whom something like that is in the slightest way appropriate. And that will just simply make them more and more anxious. I've seen that time and time again. Probably when I first started practicing 20 years ago, I might see 10 to 15% of the kids that came in to see me might have anxiety disorders. And now that number is probably 40 to 50%, which is a massive increase.
So that supports our premise that
Absolutely.
These divisive and controversial school curricula are causing the anxiety in the first place.
No question about it.
I mean,
at least that's in my opinion.
Is it the curricula in your opinion, or is it just the overall society as a whole, the access to social media and everything there? Or do you think it's really more specifically the actual curricula in schools?
I think it is the curricula, but I think there's a next step beyond it. Yes, it is the society as a whole, of course, but there's one step behind it, Mike, that I think we have to point out. And that is you got two things that are driving this engine. Number one is the departments of education at most major universities, which are not concerned with actually education as they are with teaching what they call pedagogy, which comes down to exactly the kinds of things you just had on the screen. The second thing that you need to mention or need to know on that is you have to look at the advocacy groups who are behind these things.
Yeah.
And you'll see things, basically you will see a lot of advocacy groups, and it's always
including
good.
teachers unions, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And so you see those and you look at the advocacy groups, and that will tell you who's driving the engine.
All right. So we, it can be in the form of curriculum, or it could just be on hand in a library.
Of course.
For kids. Often it's not part of the formal curriculum, but these things are available in the library. All right. Social emotional learning is what we covered pretty much the whole time with Rhonda. As you mentioned earlier, it's supposed to teach kids, and again, it's infringing on the parents' domain here, but it's designed to teach kids how to cope, with situations and people who might be different from them, whether it's how they look or their sexual preferences. And again, it's supposed to strengthen, right, the child's emotional stability. But would you agree that that's what actually happens?
No, I would not.
Gee, that's surprising.
No, I would not. I mean, look at it this way. Years ago, this all started, there was a guy, Dan Siegel, who wrote a book on social emotional learning, which was written for people like me to help us kind of evaluate where people are developmentally in a lot of different ways. And that's where they've sort of borrowed the title social emotional learning. But what they're doing is totally different. And it really is a vehicle that is being used to indoctrinate rather than educate.
All right, I want to look at two more here, and then I want to give you an example of something that's going on in a school in Rhode Island.
Okay.
But the bottom one, remove predators from our schools. You'll be pleased to know, and you don't have to comment unless you want to, but Rhode Island, I think, was the second to last state up until about 6 months ago. We finally got a coalition together with some brave lawmen. We passed a law that says even with a minor child's permission, teachers and other people, camp counselors, priests, whoever you are in any supervisory position, cannot sexually touch a child, even with the with the minor's position, as long as there was no penetration, that was legal. It's no longer so. So we took a good step in Rhode Island. Finally, the teachers union opposed that for years and years. But let's go to critical race theory again. From a psychology, we've talked about why, from a society point of view, if you want to end discrimination, then maybe we shouldn't teach discrimination. But from a child psychology point of view, which is your wheelhouse, how does teaching judging people based on the color of their skin and their parents' heritage, what does that do to a child?
Well, it sows division.
Yeah.
It pits this group against that group. And whenever you do that, whenever somebody wants to pit human beings against other human beings, I always have to ask why. What is there to gain to the person doing that? From a psychological point of view, and also as the point of view of a Christian, I believe that all humans fundamentally are made in the image and likeness of God. And they all, and because of that, everybody needs to be treated with respect, and as far as we can, with patience and with love. But when I see things like CRT, which I think is most carefully embodied in what they call the 1619 Project,
Yep.
I think what that does is it teaches people the exact opposite. It teaches people that this group really wants to oppress this group, or this group wants to oppress this group. And you end up then with the seeds of distrust of others.
Seeds of distrust, seeds of division. You said, wow, that's great. So
absolutely. And that's what I see.
So it goes perfectly to what I want to show you right here next.
All right.
This is actual notes taken by the student of a mother we know who sent this to us. This is this student's notes on a verbal assignment. The teacher didn't even have the courage to put this in writing, but this is the verbal notes. This is the notes from the verbal assignment. So write a thesis, well, here's what to put in your first paragraph, your second, your third. Again, today, U.S. has oppression, privilege, and political riots. Stereotypes oppression based on skin tone takes place through police brutality. Gender stereotypes make privilege in the workplace. They invoke the January 6th riot because of what happened, difference of political views, and due to the country's foundation on white men, the entire system is corrupt. The founding morals of the country need to be improved. All the things we just talked about, Doc, encapsulated in this one assignment. And if students are getting this day after day, assignment after assignment, course after course, teacher after teacher, where does that bring us?
Well, I think we see where it brings us. It brings us to a point of chaos. It brings us to a point where we can't even communicate with each other anymore. And that's where it brings us. And, the sad part is this is being done with children, which is just awful, because children are a gift from God, and they are given to us to cherish and to bring up so that they can walk in truth. And yet here they are, they're being taught something totally, totally different. And, when you teach children this young, those types of things, I'm assuming from what I just saw that was a person that was probably like somewhere around 12 years old or something. But it's being taught younger than that. When you teach them that something that young, it becomes so ingrained into their worldview that it is highly unlikely that you will ever be able to totally break them free from that. And that's, I was about to say that's unfortunate, but gosh, that's just the biggest understatement I could possibly make. It is tragic. It is, and I think it is, I don't have another word for it. It's demonic,
All right.
and there's no other way to say
I
it.
have one last question. I got 2
Sure.
minutes left, so we gotta be quick here, but I gotta bring this concept, something we've got our eye on. We don't understand it fully yet. I'm speculating here, but in Rhode Island, there's now language on the Rhode Island Public Schools Department of Education website about student housing, housing aid for students. There was a legislation, there was money from the governor passed for the purposes of, quote, student housing. To me, this sounds like they're preparing. They say the student housing is for homeless children who are in school who are homeless. I think it goes beyond. I think with this transgender craze, you've heard all about it. We didn't even get a chance to talk about that today. If you want to tie it in 2 minutes, please do. But I think they're preparing to take kids from their parents. If their parents don't agree with the values that are being taught by the school system, and have a place to house them.
Huh.
I
Wow.
ask you to keep your eye on that in case you're
I
seeing
will.
it anywhere else, but also, should a government, for political reasons, ever take a child away from the care of his or her parents?
I can't imagine a circumstance where, for political reasons, that would even remotely be acceptable. I mean, it is so contrary. It is so contrary to the foundational principles of our country. It is so contrary to any principles of any reasonable psychology of which I'm aware, and it is certainly contrary to it is certainly contrary to the law of God. So for those 3 reasons, I would say I can't imagine that. I have not seen that provision, because obviously in Georgia, I don't take a look at Rhode Island law very much, but I will go look at that. I will go look at that, because that wording, as you
Yeah, it's not
presented it,
law.
is
It's
pretty
just,
worrisome.
it's not law. It's just language on the website, and there was some money allocated for the purposes of
Holy
student
cow.
housing for children with, who are homeless. All right, Dr. Robert Jones, you are a board member for Truth in Education.
Yes, sir.
Rhonda Thomas, again, you're following up on our great interview with her.
Yes.
Boy, you gave us some terrific insight there as a psychologist, because I think child psychology is going to be the hot topic in the coming years.
I
And
think you're right.
and it's all a ruse, in my view. It's all a ruse. Dr. Robert Jones, thank you for joining us on In the Dugout.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be with you.
All right, we'll hope to talk to you and Rhonda again soon. Good day.
Love it.
Thanks again to Dr. Robert Jones for this compelling interview. I hope you enjoyed it. We look forward to working with him, with Rhonda Thomas, and with all our friends at Truth in Education to continue to expose the harmful and divisive agenda that our public schools are so quickly adopting. Remember, go to quick links at the top of our page of oceanstatecurrent.com to see all of our Only on the Current episodes. Good day.